Professor Jo Pheonix recently joined the Women's Rights Network to look back on her successful employment tribunal against the Open University and the impact it's still having on evolving guidance. Here's a short excerpt from that conversation with WRN's Heather Binning.
Long supporter of WRN, its women and its work. Hi, Jo. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you. And it's an absolute delight to be here, but also to see a few familiar faces. I just want to pull something out before we even begin, because one of your members will know exactly what it is. It was something I was given by Kelly during the course of the employment tribunal. So it sits on my desk.
Oh, that's wonderful. That's so nice. So nice. Yeah. So you touched on the employment tribunal, and one of the things is what life after. So we start there. How is your life?
Well, that's actually a much bigger question than is easy to answer. And I thought that, because to be perfectly frank with you, people often ask me, how are you? And I often say, I'm fine. Life is good. Life it's the land of milk and honey, post-employment tribunal. And it is. But there are other things. So I thought, if it's okay with you, Heather, that I just kind of go through some of the highlights and lowlights of the last year and a bit.
Just take it away. Sure.
Yeah.
Yep.
So before I came here, my partner and I were eating dinner, and I said to PJ, what is life like after an employment tribunal? Can you tell me what my life is like, right? And this is what she said, right? So I'm giving you what my partner says life is like after an employment tribunal. We thought that we would go back to normal, but there was no normal left. We had to find a new normal. The last year and a bit has had lots of opportunities, which I'll talk about. But nevertheless, I have remained, this is her words, not mine, I don't agree with them. I have remained haunted by some of the stuff from the employment tribunal. I'd say it's just a little difficult to let go of, which, I'll talk about some of that stuff. And that both of us still find ourselves on a regular basis actually talking about the 3 weeks in Watford and the experience of that. That was, I think, a defining experience in both of our lives. And of course, seeing what's going on with Sandy Peggy, at the moment has kind of brought some of that back up. But then also one of the key things that we both realized is that employment wins are fine, but they don't actually secure the social change that we need. Right. So that kind of sounds sad, but instead of leaving it on a sad note, and I want to fill in some of the gaps on all of that, what I want to actually talk about for a few minutes is what I've been up to for the last year and a half, because I did go a bit quiet. I don't know if people have been aware. I've kind of withdrawn a little bit from X. I've withdrawn a little bit from making a lot of big public statements. I haven't done a lot of public speaking recently. Some of that was, a necessary health break. I had a problem with my shoulder that took me out of action for nearly 4 months. But some of it, too, was a bit of a strategic withdrawal because I was involved in some other stuff that wasn't high profile, but nevertheless, I would like to say, was rather impactful. So can I just rattle through 18 months of my life?
Yeah, keep going.
Right. Well, one of the joys of winning that employment tribunal, apart from the fact that I still love paragraph 22, the most brilliant paragraph in that entire judgment, which basically said that the Open University academics fell short of any standard that the tribunal judges had, which I quite liked. So after that, I went on I called it my victory lap, a tour of different universities. I was invited by Academics for Academic Freedom in different universities to go and talk about the employment tribunal, about the judgment, about what had happened. And that was wonderfully cathartic, wonderfully cathartic. And one of the things that it really showed me is that there is, despite what happened to me and what happened to Kathleen Stock, there is nevertheless an absolute appetite in universities to deal with both the problem of freedom of speech, but also the problem of the treatment of gender critical academics and the kind of the capture, for lack of better words. And so, 4 months were spent going to different universities, including, the heart of the evil empire, Edinburgh University. Right. So I was able to talk at Edinburgh University. I think it was the 1st of May last year. And there must have been more than 200 people who attended.
Wow.
Yeah. And to me, that was like, oh my goodness, 200 people from Edinburgh University. There was a full security presence. In the last year, I've got used to full security presences, which is a strange thing to say. But there was a full security presence, but there were absolutely no protesters bar one. And that protester just got up and, at one point in the course of the talk and said a few things, and I invited him to leave, and he left, so it was, a protest. It wasn't.
Grown up.
Yeah. It was just like, okay. So that was amazing. And then that whole victory lap ended with another very momentous but low-key thing that happened. My own vice chancellor, Robert Van den Oort, and my head of school, James Devaney, paid a fairly substantial amount of money to host an evening in which myself, Ben Cooper, my case, the adored Ben Cooper, yes, and Annie Powell, my lawyer, and I talked about what happened, right? And that coincided with Sex Matters releasing the lessons learned from the Jo Pheonix case. So we had a full Sex Matters presence. I say they paid because they had to put on a lot of extra security. And the university paid for a sit-down formal dinner for 30 people who I invited. Now that doesn't sound like a lot, but that's big. University terms, that's massive. Mm-hmm. And the vice chancellor attended, my head of school attended. So that kind of brought the victory tour to its end in May of last year. And then I thought, well, I'm going to sit back and just try and take on board what I've done, or what we all did, because it wasn't just me, was it? Let's face it, it was all the support from everybody. But I didn't have much time to rest, because some of you may or may not have known about this, and so I'll go into a tiny bit of detail. Within a matter of weeks of me saying, right, that's it, I'm just going to put my tools down for a second and catch my breath, the Labour government suspended the second commencement of the Higher Education Freedom of Speech Act, right? Now, that was a devastating blow, because in my mind, although my employment tribunal had some very clear things to say to universities, it's only a tribunal in the lower court, so nobody has to pay attention to it if they don't want to. So I was really hoping that the Higher Education Freedom of Speech Act and its second commencement, particularly the tort, the contract stuff, but all of the promote duties that it placed on universities to promote freedom of speech, I had really hoped that would be the lever, if you like, to create change in universities. And so when Labour suspended that, I was devastated. And I was devastated particularly because what it looked like Labour were doing was pitting one protected characteristic against another. So they were saying this is going to create anti-Semitism without recognizing that it was the one lever that we had to really make universities pay attention to their duties towards gender critical staff and students. So that happened in June. And then before I knew it, I got involved with the Free Speech Union. And again, I don't know how much of this was public. I put it out on Twitter at one point. It wasn't public for quite a while. But myself and another academic became the key witnesses for the Free Speech Union's judicial review of the government's decision. And I'd like to go into some of the detail of that. I can't, I'm not legally allowed to, but I am pretty convinced. Abhishek provided a statement about the fact that universities are ready for, because the universities at the time were going, oh, this is going to be terribly burdensome, we're not ready, blah, 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 blah. And he was able to speak to that. My witness statement, which was not as long as the one for the employment tribunal, basically said, you've thrown the gender critical staff to the wall, and this is the effect that it's had. And, I was able to bottom it out with a lot of evidence in there. And from what I understand, once Bridget Phillipson saw that, they pretty much caved. And in fact, they did. They caved the day before the JR was happening. So I would like to say, I don't want to be big-headed about it, but I would like to say that decision may not have gone that way. I think we would have always won the JR, but I think that the government wouldn't have caved if it didn't have my witness statement in it and the evidence of what's happened to gender critical academics and how the Higher Education Freedom of Speech Act and Promote Duty would have addressed those matters.
Oh, Jo, that's huge.
Yeah, that was big. I couldn't talk about it. Do you know what I mean? I couldn't sing about it, but I am very proud of the fact that I took part in that. Very, very proud. And then, of course, that was in December of last year, which is only a few months ago. Most of last year, from August to December, I was out with a broken shoulder blade. But then we come to the beginning of this year, and of course we have the 4 Women Scotland, right? And who didn't? I defy any of you not to smile just when I say 4 Women Scotland. What a tremendous win. Yeah. Right? What a tremendous win. Now, I didn't have any part in that. I wasn't one of the interveners. I would have loved to have been one of the lesbian interveners because that sounds like a superhero.
Yes.
Wasn't.
What's your superpower? I'm an intervener.
Yeah, exactly. But I was there. I was there for the 2 days in November when it was being heard, and I was there when the judgment was read out. And I don't know if anybody, I don't know if you could do hands up or anything like that, but were many of you there that day? Because I want, just for the people who weren't there, to relay one moment. When the judge started reading out the judgment, he started with the, this isn't a win for anyone, blah, 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 both sides, blah, 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 blah. And then he said, but sex means biological sex. There was like 100 people in the room. Everyone went, and you could hear that intake of breath. And it was electric. So I was really, really chuffed to be there. And of course, in my head, and this is where we come to the theme of what I'm trying to say, the realization that these legal wins don't necessarily create the social change we want. Yes. What happened in the weeks after and continues to happen after the 4 Women Scotland judgment has appalled me, because we are now in a situation where organizations, employers, activists are turning breaking the law into a moral virtue. Mm-hmm. And that to me is an extraordinarily lawless place. So let's just do a little bit of, I don't know how we are for time, but I'm kind of coming.
Fine. Yeah.
Okay. So that happened in April, and around that time, sadly, I was also dealing with, and I'm sorry for some of the personal stories, I was dealing with the fact that my father died. It's okay. It's just been one of the, it's just been one of those years. Seems to have been one of those years for about 5 years now. Yeah. So I was, again, dipping in and out of stuff, trying not to be too public, and also trying to figure out, what this new normal is, because, I've said to a lot of people who listened, I accidentally fell into this. I didn't set out to be an activist or a campaigner for this. I set out just to be an academic. That I was able to affect change and have a hand in some of the changes that we've seen is a source of great pride, but it's not what I set out to do. So we get to the For Women Scotland, then we get to the lawlessness that's happening, and I'm kind of reeling from all of this, thinking, how can we be in this place where we win so much and yet we've lost so much? And when are the grown-ups going to come into the room? When out of the blue, to me, because I wasn't paying attention, the Office for Students guidance on the promote duty that universities have dropped, right? Again, I don't know how many of you are kind of involved in academia. I'll very happily provide you with the link to the Office for Students guidance on the promote duty, promote freedom of speech, because it is a masterclass in saying what institutional neutrality looks like.
Really?
Oh, it's a masterclass in it, and reading it, because I am very skeptical about the Office for Students being able to actually create change in universities, right? Especially without the tort. But when I read that guidance, I was like, oh, hang on, this has so many worked out examples that show you, in very clear detail where universities and the action of staff and students unlawfully infringe other people's freedom of speech, that I think it should be sent to every single organization. Wow. So that was great. That was like, good news. But the bad news, or not the bad news, the weird news was reading it and realizing that my case was me and Kathleen Stock, all over the guidance, and it was like, okay, wonderful. We had an effect. Oh yeah, but had this been here 5 years ago? So yeah, good news, bad news. And then I want to end with what I learned right in the course of the last year and a bit. So I've learned many things as a result of this strange course my life took. And one of the things I learned is that I'm a bit bullshit.
Not you.
I sent an email in early May to one of the people in the university who has a responsibility for implementing For Women Scotland. And the email simply said, when will the University of Reading become For Women Scotland compliant? Because we currently have self-identification policies. Anyone can self-identify into the category of woman, right? And I got, there was an extended email exchange. And it was clear to me that whilst the overall desire was to become compliant with the For Women Scotland Supreme Court ruling, it was all terribly complicated. I pointed out, I myself and a few others pointed out that this was perhaps not the best legal footing to be on, and that every day that certain things didn't happen, like the removal of the self-identification policies, is a day that enabled somebody like myself with a certain degree of legal knowledge to make a case for sex discrimination and belief discrimination. And I am exceedingly pleased to report that it only took about 4 weeks for the University of Reading to go from a dead stop to being fully For Women Scotland compliant. We are, to my knowledge, the only university that has done that. Wow.
Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel and tap the bell to make sure you don't miss new content. Sign up to our newsletter at www.womenscotland.org womensrights.network. And if you're interested in becoming a member, click on the Join Us link.